Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm JC Conti, the CEO of VIOOH, and I cannot find the right word to say how delighted, excited, pleased we are at VIOOH to be here in front of you today, because obviously we wanted obviously to do this trip for quite some time, and unfortunately there were bugs around during a few years, and it really kept us in a position where it wasn't really easy to travel. But these are not excuses. But the point here, we are here today very pleased and enjoying, meaning great city, great weather, great company. And the point for us is absolutely to be able to share with you some of the latest trends in programmatic out of home. So as you know, programmatic out of home is very hot in the market. Everybody is talking about that. We are talking about that, and we are pleased that everybody is talking about that. But the point now is to try to understand how it is going, what are the trends, and how we can make, meaning this trend, even stronger. We've seen quite a lot of dynamics in markets. We've seen these kind of test and learn phase, and what we are also starting to see is the logic of scale and increase. And this is really where we do believe that with a little push, this market can really be into in the next quarters. So that's what excites us a lot. But to be able to speak about that, what we've done, we've been investing in a global survey, which is running in 5 markets: Australia, France, Germany, the US, and the UK. And we are interviewing with 200 media execs from either brand advertisers or from media agency to really ask them very, very open questions about how things are moving and everything. And we are combining all this. So we did that obviously last year, and for the first time, meaning this market was included, but because of the capacity, because of the fact that we could not travel, we could not obviously be in front of you today. So this year we did it again. We did that again with your market, and we're going to be obviously most glad to present these big trends with you today. So obviously, this is meant to be an intro, and because marketing was really afraid that I would be speaking too much, they really restricted me in the size of the paper to put my notes. But I love them anyway. So few things, right? I think the most important is to really understand that programmatic out of home is adding net new budgets. And that's very important, because if the point is just to recycle what was already hitting the screens in the streets or in shops or in airport by just making it programmatic, that would not be a net new incremental value. So it is not the case. It is actually bringing you clients. Many, many reasons for that. We're going to talk about that. But if you can see, no, that's me. Usually, here we go. No, that's fine. I'm going to tell you. So 39% completely new budgets. We've got 10% budget coming from other traditional media, and we've got 14% existing digital budget, which means money spent on social getting into programmatic out of home. That's quite interesting, because this is where the big money is, and this is where we are up to, and this is what we want to develop as a trend. Second trend, even more interesting and exciting, actually. 60% of the Australian respondents intend to plan or buy programmatic out of home in the next 12 months, which means that you should expect more budget coming, bigger campaigns running, and this is what's going to make, obviously, the pie bigger, which means everybody going to be in a much better position betting onto this medium. That means for the media owner, investing in screens, investing in capabilities. That means that for brands to be able to have greater return, make their money and budgets working harder, and for the users, well, potentially a closer way, meaning to engage with brands, which is what we absolutely like about this medium. And the last point is, what is great about programmatic out of home is the fact that you can be absolutely targeted. Data is playing a great role in this kind of context. Real-time data will help. Real-time data is what's going to make your campaign even more relevant. And all this data, which is, in that case, the buyer's data, which is activated by either brands with their first-party data or through DSPs or through DMPs that are in a position where they can actually have a greater level of relevancy, make their money work harder, and be able to really engage with the right audiences. And that is actually a big change. And that is a great story, because what does that mean? That means that now programmatic trading out of home is able to respond to performance campaign. All of a sudden, the playground is much bigger. It's not just about branding. And that's absolutely superbly exciting because that means that now this medium traded programmatically as a way to actually tackle and address advertisers who were just spending on video or social media. But I will not say no more, meaning it's high time for me to welcome Shamini, our Australian New Zealand regional head of partnerships, and she's obviously going to have a fantastic panel. I guess I'm on it, right? Yeah, I'm on it. Okay, good. Shamini.
I'm Shamini. I'm the Regional Partnerships Director at VIOOH, and I look after the Australia New Zealand region. Really excited to be here, and thank you all for joining us this morning. Before we get started, I'd just like to mention a few things. We do have a Q&A at the end of this session, so please do send through questions. You can either send it through via the QR code, which you'll see on the slides shortly, or you can log into slido.com and enter password login and send in questions that way as well. We also do welcome socials, so please do tweet and hashtag SOTNAU so that we can retweet, etc. Okay, so to get started, I'd like to introduce our panel to you. So maybe starting with Brad, if you'd like to come up and introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, Shamini. So Brad Palmer, National Programmatic Director for JCDecaux. Pleasure to be here, guys. Am I sitting next to you?
Okay, great. And Georgina?
Hi, I'm Georgie, National Head of Strategic Investment and Partnerships at Matterkind.
And John?
Hi, I'm John McNerney, Senior Director of Platforms for APAC, Yahoo.
Cool, and you've all met JC.
That's me. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we're going to start. The first question is around data. So in both VIOOH's State of the Nation report and the recent IAB Australia survey, real-time data is seen as key to boosting investment in programmatic DOOH and facilitating growth in the channel, with 49% of Australian respondents asking for this. So the question is, are you seeing the importance of real-time data being reflected within your business, and how has it affected your business operations?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, ultimately, real-time data is why we're here today, because we've been able to trade our inventory in real time due to the programmatic capabilities. So over the last sort of 2 or 3 years for us, we've obviously had VIOOH, and welcome to our shores. It's been great to have you guys here and putting on such a great event today. But we've brought those capabilities in, and that's bringing the ability for clients to buy our inventory, based on real-time triggers or based on, different data sources that they want. So, we've got our house in order. And then I think what it's meaning is that we've brought in sort of DSPs and trading desks who are really sharp digital minds to start looking at what has always been quite a traditional medium. So the DSPs have great access to data triggers like weather, pollen, traffic counts, potentially sales data. And there's a real opportunity for clients to exploit that and really start to activate their out-of-home off the back of it. I would say that it's still probably experimental at the moment. I wouldn't say it's as widespread. The capabilities are there, but clients are still sort of experimenting at the moment. So I think that's a massive opportunity as we go into next year.
Cool, thank you, Brad. And Georgina, do you share the same sentiments as Brad?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Matterkind being a programmatic business, that is where the agencies are looking to us to implement the data aspect of it to sort of complement the traditional side of out-of-home. So when we are activating campaigns, they are certainly aiming to be data-led or certainly using the capabilities that the DSPs do bring, because that is exactly how we're sort of transacting all through DSPs, all in real time. So yeah, absolutely, data is why they come to us.
Great. And John?
Yeah, so exactly what Georgie was saying there. The data that we use, particularly with the behavioural aspects, isn't used real time now. It is quite nascent in digital out-of-home, and I think it's really important that we don't think about real-time data just for targeting in real time, because that's when things get too granular. In programmatic, we tend to go very, very granular and hyper-targeting, and that's exactly what programmatic out-of-home isn't about. But absolutely, the data that we're using for insights for all types of online behaviours and using that to strategically use that for programmatic out-of-home in an omni-channel way is absolutely the way forward. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. So I'm going to move on to the next question. Programmatic is generally considered to have broadened DOOH appeal as a hybrid medium, delivering both upper funnel activities and lower funnel conversions. From the Australian report, advertising budgets currently skew towards performance spend. So Georgina, from your perspective, do you think brands put too much emphasis on performance-driven campaigns, and do you see this changing in the next 12 to 18 months?
I think it depends. I'd say that we certainly think that both upper funnel and performance-based are really important, and I guess historically out-of-home's been more sort of that awareness, and some of these capabilities do allow us to go sort of more for that performance. I think in this economic climate, like brands are maybe a little bit tighter with their budgets and wanting to see return on ad spend quite quickly, or sort of wanting to be able to measure those things. But I'd say that it's really important to still consider both aspects for true success in your marketing budgets. I think you can't be looking at one or the other. It has to be both. Just how you cut and dice it.
And John?
Yeah, we did a study last year actually at Yahoo, and 91% of the media respondents said that they see it as both upper and lower funnel. And we definitely see that today with a lot of the campaigns that are coming through, because not just being amazing at awareness, digital out-of-home when done tactically for consideration is phenomenal. And a lot of our briefs right now, when they give us what they're trying to achieve, has a lot of mid to lower, but then also the brand top funnel stuff as well. So it was primarily very performance driven to start with, and that was to get programmatic over the line with how good it is at driving that performance aspect and that point of difference from traditional static digital out-of-home. But yeah, that's definitely moving on quite quickly now.
So it's relevant for every budget now.
Every budget.
I will book some.
JC, are you seeing that from an international perspective?
Well, so what, meaning my fellow colleagues here have been saying is absolutely obvious and is great because this is obviously helping this medium to have a much wider kind of brief that it can actually be thought for, and that's what we want. At the end of the day, this trend is also applying in many other markets. I don't think about any other market we've been operating in, and we're operating in 17 markets right now, where we have not seen meaning this trend. So it's coming much more obviously understood that programmatic out of home is helping to address upper funnel, lower funnel briefs. And that's obviously increased the capacity for the medium to address a wider pool of advertisers, get new advertisers meaning to jump in. And this is really meaning very, very exciting. We've got some showcase, for example, for the APAC region with Schroeder in Singapore that was done with you guys, where mobile plus out of home got plus 80% in terms of click-through rates, meaning these kind of things can really mean, it's not just meaning a marginal increase, right? It's significantly increased. And if you track and if you see the data and if you understand this, you can really, really be very comfortable to really respond to performance brief with programmatic out of home, provided you have the right data and the right approach.
Okay, great. So talking about international trends, in other markets internationally, we are seeing growth in programmatic DOOH, largely driven by what we call always-on deals. Always-on deals are continuously running deals, generally set at the DSP level, allowing for one or more advertisers to quickly and easily tap into supply. What do you think needs to be addressed in the Australian market to really start adopting this model? Let's start with you, John.
More demand density. I think still, even though Australia is ahead of the game with its maturity in this space, we absolutely need more demand to come in for it to be more competitive within the exchange. And then those always-on deals will be able to be audience-led. At the moment, a lot of the briefs and deals being negotiated are one-on-one per those briefs with specific audiences related to them. For them to be always on, we also need the demand side when the DSPs to actually have first-party data to be activated, so that it's looking at either at an always-on deal or open exchange. In the US, where we've got a lot of first-party data being activated through the buy side, it is more prevalent to be buying open exchange or always-on deals. In these markets, not so much. One, because the media owners want more control, and that's a huge piece where they want to basically make sure that that supply is going to be sold without it being programmatic guaranteed. And then, the other thing is they just want to make sure that reporting rates and everything else, because they're still on that journey. So, a few things.
And Brad, are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, I think it's definitely got a place. Probably we'll start running clients on it sort of next year. But it's sort of been this sort of 2-year test and learn with a lot of clients, and we've probably got 10 or 20% of our clients that we work with are probably working on us on like at least a quarterly or a monthly basis for us to go, okay, do you want to have always on access to our inventory? So I think that's just a natural maturity step, and we're kind of ready to do it with certain clients. But also putting the media owner cap on, it's not as easy to do in out of home because there's a lot of compliance issues you have to get around. So if we look at Matterkind as an example, we can't do a run of Matterkind deal for small format because you've got Lion who's got alcohol compliant, you've got Pizza Hut for high fat, sugar, salt, and they can't be on the same panels as what Specsavers could be. So the only way for us to get around that, from a government restrictions perspective, is to make sure we do it on an advertiser-specific level, which is totally fine, particularly in that sort of first iteration of it, because clients will, they'll want to sort of test and learn, and there is only, maybe 20 clients of ours that we would probably start to push this towards next year. So sorry, Georgie, it's not as easy to do as the sort of run of publisher piece that you would do in those kind of digital ecosystem at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing John talk about it. It reminds me of BVOD 6 years ago. I think the demand density is exactly the piece. When I think of our BVOD landscape, we run predominantly on always-on deals. We do very little programmatic guaranteed. It's all PMPs for the most part. But I guess where we're at with out of home at the moment, with somewhat limited but growing demand, specific advertisers with very different needs, I guess it's harder to adopt that approach. And I think as well, different media owners having different approaches to it is, again, it's the same as what BVOD was a few years ago. Once the media owners are all operating in the same kind of capacity and there's some kind of, it's the same across all of them, it's easier for buyers as well, because you don't want to be like, oh, with this publisher I'm doing with this, then with this I'm doing this, like it becomes very complex. Yeah. So when there's some sort of parity across the market with how it's all being approached, as well as, the demand density, we're just repeating BVOD. At least we know what to do.
Okay, cool. So there's a bit of way to go, but
but there's a lot of progress as well. Like when I think back to a few years ago when we first started having conversations about programmatic digital out of home, not all media owners were even on board with the concept of running programmatic, and so I think there's been a long way that we've come, but we're still, I would say, somewhat in its infancy.
And it's not detrimental to the buyers. It's just a few more operational aspects on the supply side. Having deals is absolutely fine. And it's just the journey that Georgie's talking about. You know, we've seen this in our programmatic life in other channels. It's just about as those media owners catch up and are more aligned, when there's more standardization with the industry,
collaboration,
all of it, it starts to then become a more seamless experience.
Makes sense. Okay, cool. So I'm going to move on to the next question, which is around where you're seeing budgets for programmatic DOOH coming from. So this year's report highlighted that whilst some advertisers are converting existing traditional budgets to buy programmatic DOOH, there is more budgets coming in as incremental spend, with 39% of Australians saying they've added new budgets, 14% have utilised existing digital budgets, and 10% have moved budgets from other traditional media, such as print. Let's start with JC this time. So what's your take on this?
So this is really meaning in the same trend as what we are seeing in other markets, except that this is even a bit better, right? So that means that really tells us that the market here is a bit more mature in terms of how they are approaching, meaning this new medium, which is great. The point, obviously, for us is not just when we are talking to a media owner, is not just to tell them that's going to be a great new channel. You're going to see you're going to get a lot of advertisers, but actually that's just going to be the advertisers you're already getting money from, but in a different way. That's not obviously the game. Obviously, you still going to have the the advertisers who were spending in a traditional fashion through an insertion order that going to actually now realize they've got a new capability, and we're going to accommodate that. We don't want to say, no, you cannot because you have started to spend in a classical way. But the point here is to really be able to open widely to new advertisers. And this is what we're actually seeing, right? What we've seen, for example, in France in the first 6 months when they launched, meaning last year, 80% of the advertisers were actually new to the media owner. 60% were new to the medium itself. In the German market, it's pretty much 75%. In the UK, 70%. So what we are actually seeing is two things. First, a lot of new advertisers are actually trying to understand, and because they are essentially only digital, they are getting a bit more enticed to actually try. Two, the ones who have a data approach and who are buying audiences and not just meaning classic spray and pray when they're actually thinking about their media plan, are eager actually to try new things, and they are actually coming into this medium, which is great. And three, the entry barrier in terms of budget is much lower. In a traditional IO logic, if you want to really be efficient in your out-of-home campaign, you very often need to get into a 6-digit number campaign. Here, because you're going to be leveraging your data from a buy side and really buying exactly what you want, when you want, with the message are going to be even more hyper relevant from data, you're actually going to get very, very good impact with budgets around 50, 70, 80K. So more brands are really able, meaning to try the medium and then try to contemplate the fact that it can be actually having a greater position within their media plan. So that's absolutely great news.
John or Georgina, do you have any input on this?
Yeah, look, JC covered most of it actually, but
Yeah, that was my turn to go most.
next question. No, we're actually seeing the biggest one is barriers to entry are very low to the point. The examples that we've got of buyers coming in, a lot of them digital only, finally realizing they've got this new audience that are all offline that they can actually engage with and measure, has seen a huge increase in the incremental net new advertisers coming to this channel. So that's been really attractive to them. And a lot of the independent agencies can also move really fast with them because they're digital only. So it's taken a lot of less time. We've been educating the holdcos and the entire industry. The indies have been moving fast with smaller brands, smaller budgets that didn't necessarily do any above the line previously. The other side of it is, which I don't think JC mentioned, is that we've got a lot of the direct digital out-of-home buyers, and we position programmatic out-of-home that it's not to cannibalize or take away from. It complements any static digital out-of-home with programmatic, because programmatic adds a specific value that the other two don't offer, which is, they big bulk buys and share of voice, reach, play, and then complemented by more tactical strategies. That's where it starts to add that incremental revenue as well.
Sense.
Yeah, I think they've covered most of it, but you both made points that I certainly resonate with in terms of the complementing. Like from a traditional out-of-home complemented by some portion of the budget being programmatic. I know some of the clients have seen amazing results when combined, and I guess the idea is then that no, we're not trying to take from traditional, but a percentage of to get more efficient results. But again, the barriers to entry for the SMEs, you think of like Facebook back in the day, like companies can spend a lot less money and actually be in the game for advertising. And I'd say historically there's a lot of clients that might have wanted to spend in out-of-home, but they couldn't afford to, and now they can. So, I mean, obviously being a big holdco, we do have clients with big budgets, but there also are some smaller clients or digital only, like we say, where there's, so I'd say there's budgets coming from all different areas, but it's all only positive because it, creates opportunities.
We've definitely seen the same trend. So half of our revenue as a business come from the top tier of clients, but only 10% of our programmatic revenue is coming from the same clients. So it's really appealing to that mid-lower tier, and then also the people that don't even advertise with us on a direct IO basis. So it's playing in the space that we said it would, but we've got some good data to look at now to confidently say that. So we're not seeing the cannibalizing piece at all.
That's very positive for the narrative. So the next question is, Australian advertisers have shown their desire to align programmatic DOOH alongside other programmatic activity, as the top learning request in the State of the Nation report is around information on cross-channel measurement and attribution. Is there a place, the question's twofold actually, is there a place for standalone programmatic DOOH campaigns, or do you think it's more effective for it to be planned with other channels? And the second question is, what can out-of-home learn from other channels who have gone through programmatic transformation? Let's start with Georgina.
I'd say both. We have some clients that are operating purely as digital out-of-home, most likely complementing a percentage of their traditional out-of-home budget, but I think there's a place for that, and that's where we use, Vista, for example. But we also have a lot of clients wanting to run in an omni-channel capacity and running alongside their other channels, and that's where we, use Yahoo or DV360, or depending, Trade Desk, whoever the client is utilising. I think both, to answer that question. And then there's a ton we can learn from BVOD. And I think there's other channels that are still on that journey. But I know, 8 years ago, when we first started trading BVOD programmatically, we called it programmatic, but it was kind of an IO done through a tag out of a DSP. Like, deals didn't even exist. And you were still literally signing an IO for every campaign, to now where, there's so much capability, so much scale. Some of the broadcasters are seeing, more done programmatically than, I'm going to call it traditional digital, obviously nowhere near as much as TV itself, but the it's overtaken or grown so much in its capabilities. The DSPs have evolved so significantly, along with the way people are buying and the understanding, as well as the user experience. Like, I mean, I don't really hear of too many user experience issues when it comes to out of home the same way it did in BVOD, but everything over time with collaboration, tech development, media owners working together to understand that, like, if we're all on this journey together, we're going to get more money out of it. Everyone's going to get more money out of it. Collaboration time and just coming together to work on those challenges, as well as just like advertisers start to see the results, businesses start to see the results, then there's more momentum. But it's you can imagine in 5 years we'd be sitting here having very different conversations about digital.
That was going to be my question. Do you think it's going to take us 8 years?
Well, I'd say 3 years ago BVOD was still in a great place, but when I think back to as long as we've been working in BVOD, like, a lot has changed. I'd say that because of the journey a lot of the agencies have been on, as well as the DSPs in some of these other channels, I would hope that the learning is faster, because we know what it can take to kind of get there faster, but it's going to take time.
Agreed. I don't think it's going to take as long as it did with BVOD. We've got a lot of muscle memory from all those learnings. And 3 years ago, when I was traveling around Australia and New Zealand learning about out of home, I could literally see myself 10 years prior going, I know exactly what this journey is going to take and what we need to do, and that's where the education journey began. But to this point, the question is subjective. Yes, there is an absolute place for doing programmatic out of home as a solo channel, if the brief requires it. We get a brief from a client. If it looks like a traditional one, we'll push it back and go and book it direct. These are the reasons why you would book programmatic out of home. If the brief is more orientated towards understanding a marketing mix and a consumer journey, an omni-channel solution goes back, and we would work with the agency on what that would look like. So absolutely, there's a place for whatever the actual requirement of the brand is.
Cool. Does anyone else have anything else they would like to add, JC or Brad?
A lot has been said already, but I don't want obviously to repeat some of the points. What I just would like to really insist a bit more is on the second part of the question, which is the multi-channel kind of dimension, which I think gonna also bring an angle here. At the end of the day, right, if we really would like to see, and there is always meaning a debate, programmatic out of home on its own or in complement to a direct buy from out of home, or programmatic out of home as an additional kind of part of a programmatic budget that's going to be going into social or video. I think that the most exciting part of it is the latter, right? Is when we are going to be creating the kind of the approach in everybody within media agencies to think that potentially social is overinvested right now, and we may just adjust a bit what we are spending in social, maybe 85% of the budget's there, and because arguably you're going to get meaning the same results with 85% of your budget versus 100% of your budget, or meaning the kind of few additional percent are going to be within this 15% of the budget that you're going to be spending right on top. And this 15% actually you put them into programmatic out of home. I can guarantee you, and I'm happy meaning to pay a lunch to everybody here if I'm wrong, that the out... By the way, that's a limited time offer. Thank you. She's my CMO, not my legal advisor. But anyway, fine. So, but the point here is you will have a much greater impact because mobile plus out of home, social plus out of home, meaning all these mediums are complementing themselves very well. And this is where you are getting the 1 + 1 = 2.5. And that's going to obviously make you very famous within your media agencies. They're going to make you a real hero within your marketing team. Everybody's going to love you. It's going to be fantastic.
I think one thing on top of JC's making you famous point is actually the actual consumer's experience. When you think about the ability to do cross-channel marketing, it is understanding that consumer journey at whatever touch point. What's really exciting about this is that it's all measurable now. So you can attribute a channel's influence from that particular budget to the consumer journey and actually have a creative that's relevant for wherever that person is within it. So whether the person's waking up, going for a run on audio, to then driving to work, seeing the same billboard, but in a different way with if it's a male or female creative or whatever in the building, like this is all doable now. We can do dynamic creative based on weather, pollen, all this kind of stuff. If you don't do this in a single view, you lose that. You lose that ability to give the consumer a proper experience. So doing silos in 5 different platforms is a problem. It's huge tech tax. There's no consistency to the creative. It's a poor experience, or it's just it's the same creative spraying and praying approach, which is very heavy lifting if you're using multiple platforms. So that omni-channel cross-platform piece there's a huge advantage to it.
And just kind of honing in on cross-channel measurement and attribution, just what you're talking about now. It is a hot topic across all media types, but programmatic DOOH in particular is being called out as being one of the channels that's difficult to demonstrate. Is it fair as an industry, and do you think we should collectively be, what do you think we should be collectively be doing to address this? I was going to go with Brad first, but okay.
No, that's fine. I think that there are many. We won't be dancing around the bush right here, right? What we need to do is to actually invest and put, meaning the right level of money to be able to prove it works. And the challenge is that we need to do that in every market, because obviously everybody's going to tell you, oh yeah, but that's working in the UK, it's not here, absolutely different. Well, yeah, go figure, but fine. We are absolutely ready to do this, and I think this is important that everybody is having a let's prove it works kind of approach, and that means meaning doing pre-post or being able to leverage, as John said, meaning data, because you are using data to buy. There is data that we can track and we can actually put together to really demonstrate it has an impact. So the measurement dimension is granted a bit more complicated, meaning to push than on a traditional digital media where you've got a direct interaction with the end user, clicking on an ad or doing something, fair, but it's actually not so complicated to actually put in place, because you can track traffic to store, traffic to web fairly easily. You can track with mobile ID data when people are within the vicinity of a place, and so on and so forth. So these technology are not rocket science, and they do exist. That potentially something that costs a bit more, but we're absolutely ready from our point of view to try to put meaning that money behind to really support the media agencies who are ready to take their advertisers onto the journey. Because what I think at the end, it's a fantastic medium that can have a greater kind of impact. And it has, obviously, and it's high time, it leaves the silo in which it's been for many years.
And I think what's interesting about this is the sharing of information, right? Yes. So you would have seen the showcase before. There was a lot of examples up there with results that were all sort of European or US campaigns. I don't think we've been great in this market at actually sharing the results of some really successful campaigns, and we know that there's been a lot of successful ones. I think, VIOOH last year, I think we're part of about 4 or 5 different awards in Europe. So like, we're not at that stage of the market yet. Like, there's no sort of, awards at Ad News for programmatic out of home. We're still in that infant stage. So that's one of the challenges. But I think it's a matter of actually, just starting to share some of the success stories a little bit more. And whether that's within the broader ecosystem or whether that's just within the agency groups, I think that's sort of what's really important. But I was thinking back to when I first joined the business a couple of years ago, and I needed to create a large format deck because, we were going to talk to digital buyers about these big grand canvases out in market, and there's a lot of nuances. They're all individual. They're all got their own characteristics. And I asked Marie, who's in the room, I'm like, can I please have our latest research studies when it comes to sort of large format? We had to go back to like 2019 or 2018 for a study in Ireland proving large format. It's not because it doesn't work. It's because clients know it works, they don't measure it all the time. But now we've moved into this different way of trading it. We're getting asked to go, oh, you're saying, you spend 70% less budget, spend it just in this time of day, but why? How do you prove it? And I don't think we've been necessarily great at executing that, but I also think, there's probably been, it's such a short-term market, right? Like we get briefs really late, we're activating campaigns, we're not planning it well to go, we want to measure it as well, we want to prove it, and then we want to roll this out amongst the agencies. So I think those turnaround times are getting tighter, further up that sort of planning function, I think would be really beneficial for all of us, because then we're going to have some really great case studies to take out to market to provide proof to then scale this to where we think it can go.
I agree. I'd say maybe 50 to 60% of our six-figure bookings will add measurement onto it to actually prove that it works, and it works. Like to JC's point, visits to sites, footfall, all of it. It's really easy to do, and it isn't this thing that whether or not it works or not. But I think it's more about how we work with the buy side, planning, making sure that if they want to see results, what are the outcomes? Are you going to pay for measurement? Because it is part of the booking process.
And I think like those bigger campaigns have been easier to measure because the investment's there and you can marry up, and it's a bit of a bigger, longer planning process. I think the challenge we got is that 25 to 50K budgets and sort of making sure that we're proving those. But I guess it's tricky because sometimes the measurement isn't ridiculously cheap. You've got a small budget, you don't want to allocate it all to measurement. So it's a little bit tricky. But I will relate it back to the digital ecosystem. You spend 25 grand there, and just because you've got 5 clicks that were tracked, you're okay to hide behind that from a measurement perspective. But because we can't track all the clicks in out of home, it's a little bit tricky. But 5 clicks for 25K, is that a great result? Just throwing it out there. No, I'm not throwing that at anyone, but I used to work in that area, and we used to measure it based on really low click-through rates, like 0.02%. But we get a lot of pressure on us trying to measure out of home for every single campaign when that's probably not a great measurable result. And did they even buy the product from there? Like, is there those elements? So I think we get treated a little bit unfairly. That's just my
unfairly or not, but I think it's also education. So for example, a lot of clients will be, I want to retarget, re-engage my exposed users on my 25 grand campaign. You're like, okay, so how many metros, how long for 4 weeks? Yeah, you're not going to have much of a pool of an audience to re-engage. So there's those types of discussions as well, where you actually just have to be like, look, we kind of set a standard where we've seen optimal results of, say, for example, a 4-week campaign, 70 grand is a minimum of what you would do to want to re-engage that audience online. To get that offline audience to be online. Otherwise, you're not going to see results, and that can be measured. But it is literally that kind of discussion and education piece that's really important.
Absolutely agree. Education, evangelization, take a bet, go for it, be a star. That's it.
Okay, so more case studies and more awards next year.
Yeah.
So I guess talking about case studies, what are some great programmatic DOOH campaigns that you've seen, and maybe we can take turns to share it, starting with Georgina?
Yeah, so I can't share the brand, but essentially we work with a very major Australian retailer that you'd think has pretty close to 100% of the population aware of said brand. But we found through a campaign that was executed via Vista across a number of different media owners that based on some of the proximity targeting, certainly around like grocery stores or within shopping centres close to said store, the foot traffic increased considerably, which, considering that most people would be aware of the store and if they want to shop there, they would shop there, the ability to kind of really be hyper targeted on close proximity to the store increased the footfall really quite considerably, and we were able to use this case study to then entice other brands to see the value in this medium. So like we talked about, case studies in our world are so important, especially as we at Matterkind are trying to increase the amount of digital out of home run through us. showing the effectiveness even for brands that you would think, oh yeah, that they might not necessarily need it. Like that was really positive for us.
I actually spoke to said client, I won't say who the client was, a couple of weeks ago at an event, and they were actually just truly amazed with the measurement that's possible.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't get footfall data into their store. They don't have a clicker that ticks over. But for, I think it was potentially LifeSite that ran that study, they're actually able to, provide them with some visitation data and then provide optimization. So it's actually really new media for what is, probably one of the most established brands in this country.
I think as well, this is like a really good example of we were able to execute via a DSP across, 6 media owners, across a number of different types of locations and types of, street furniture or different sorts of ways with one budget that may not have been considered huge in the out-of-home world. But, we're able to be really nimble with it and measure it. That was a good one for us.
Thank you for sharing that. Brad?
I've got one that doesn't have measurement for some reason. But I think this one's just a really good example. As a media owner, we made that point earlier around not just sort of fishing in the same pot as the big clients of JCDecaux. This is a client who is a challenger beer brand. They weren't able to spend $300-400K on a big broadcast, large format campaign like a Tooheys New or a Carlton Draft or something like that. But they're able to buy in for sort of $60K onto marquee JCDecaux billboards and just run it Thursday through to Sunday, 12 to 9 p.m. Obviously, key consumption time for beer, key purchase time. So for us, this is just in really good areas. There's just so many of these clients that are working with us now that haven't been able to work with us before. So I thought it was good to call that out. I've since learned that they've been bought by Lion. I think it was because of the success of the campaign.
Think.
We'll run some more next year.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Thank you, Brad. John?
Tourism Tasmania, so around 800 grand. So they basically, in collaboration with publicists asked us to speak to them. This is coming out of COVID. They wanted to basically get people to come to Tasmania in the off-season. So we basically looked at the types of audiences, and this was an industry, actually world first, with DOOH, because what we did was we used all DOOH's data through the DMP Adobe, and because it's all in our DSP, we were able to see the types of traveling audiences on the World Wide Web, and they basically came to us and we did a session with them to understand what are those people on all these different channels doing, and the search queries, what are they buying, what kind of activities, really getting to understand the behaviors online to then put a strategy together to do an omni-channel campaign. So they ran across multiple channels. I'm not sure if it's on this slide or the next one, but it was connected TV, native audio, and programmatic out of home. And programmatic out of home was the champion. And that really did the full funnel type of activation. And we did that first awareness strategy to then drive those audiences across other online channels, and it drove some pretty significant results. I think it was 51 increase visitation on the off-season, so they've never seen this type of lift ever before. And since then, I've just been booking consistently omni-channel campaigns because it's giving them that full consumer journey that they want to understand, getting people to Tasmania, but also just awareness stuff around Tasmania as well.
Amazing, great. Thank you for sharing that. JC?
Nespresso, here we go. So that's one of the most awarded campaign, meaning we had last year, right? I think we had something like 5 or 6 awards just for this one. So we are talking about Nespresso, who wanted to have a capacity to really tell all their clients within a shopping mall when was the best time to get into their shop and avoid to have long queues, right? So it was also a way for them, meaning to share information about, meaning a promotion or a new product. But it was also very, very good use of DCO, dynamic creative optimization. So they had, meaning a little kind of captor in the entrance of the shop who was actually counting people in and out and sending in a real-time information, and it was timestamped. So you've got it here. Hope I'm not going to fall out of the stage, but anyway, you got it, the time, and the queuing time is low or high. Fairly basic, but it was actually helping people to choose what was the best time for them to get into the shop and buy their coffee capsules. And as a matter of fact, meaning they loved us, because I don't know whether we've got the next slide or not. No, we don't have to. Here we go. The proof in numbers. Before, they used to have these sort of things, spiked, which means people getting hungry, they cannot buy whenever they want, they have to wait and everything. And then you had something that it was much more manageable, an ongoing flow of people, which was at a much better meaning pace. And on top of that, more people coming to the shop. So it was really strong. You can see Uplift brand, and that's already a pretty well-known brand, right? Because one good friend of mine has been doing a pretty good campaign with these guys for many years. I think it's What Else, anyway. So 5 times on return on investment and almost 20% uplift in terms of sales. So it has been absolutely magical, and what we want is to just let people know that you can actually do that, and that's not rocket science. Fairly easy.
Thank you, JC. So there was quite a nice mix of DCO, data trigger campaigns, contextual targeting campaigns, and there's a lot more case studies, I think, on everyone's websites here that you can take a look into. We're going to wrap up the session with one last question. So I'm going to ask each of you, what is one challenge the industry needs to resolve in order to see growth? Starting with you, Brad.
I think it's the market narrative. So I think, there's been confusion in market, there's been sort of inconsistent supply provided across the board. You walk into one agency, they think something about programmatic out of home, you walk into another one, they think something completely different. So I think we need to align on what that sort of market narrative is, just to make life a little bit easier for everybody. So we've started an OMA programmatic working group, which is great. So, the big sort of media owners in the one room to talk about the programmatic future, to start to align on what that is. And I think we've got some plans to sort of launch what that is next year, sort of March, April timing. So I think that's going to be really important. We want to get rid of the confusion, we want to get rid of the blockers, and then really sort of scale this in 2023. And I think that collaboration piece is super important.
Thank you, Georgina.
Yeah, I'd sort of echo that in terms of collaboration and standardization around the market narrative. But even for us internally, like within our holdco, Matterkind, we want to do a really good job next year of educating initiative, etc., on some of these case studies and trying to get some of the advertisers that haven't worked with us in that capacity before to see the light. So we have some work to do internally as well as, I guess, from a market perspective.
Similar to Georgie, agencies' quality of briefs, I think, is really important. And this
I don't write briefs, so it's okay.
This isn't taking a dig at the agencies. It's because the structures within the holdcos are still figuring out who owns what, and really understanding if it's the digital team working in collaboration with the traditional teams, or if they're going to make a hybrid of, basically digital out of home experts, both traditional and digital. It's still TBD. Different countries are taking different approaches, but at the moment, until agencies are figuring that out, we still get briefs that are all over the shop. So we're constantly trying to educate and let them understand the point of difference of why and when and how. And we've seen huge traction. Like it's getting a lot better than what it was, but still a long road to go.
And JC?
So I would say, meaning frankly, evangelization, one of the key points, right? Meaning the message here is sharing is caring. And on the other side, you've got plenty of opportunities to really try new things and actually get great results and help, obviously, your brands come across as someone who definitely got it right and so on and so forth. And here the message is experiencing is winning. So sharing is caring, experiencing is winning.
And on that note, we're going to end the session.
We've actually got a couple of questions on Slido, but before I go to that, are there any questions in the room? Anybody who didn't type up? Okay, well, we will go to the questions on Slido. So the first one was, and this is, yes, sorry. Are there trends amongst advertisers, either by vertical or by size, who are using either just a combination of programmatic and direct, or just programmatic buying? Maybe Brad? Sorry.
Like, I think last year we would have seen a bunch of sort of lapsed clients come back into out-of-home via programmatic. And I think that sort of control factor, coming back in, pause, stop, cancel, through COVID, I think was really important. We've probably seen sort of less of that. I actually think we've also seen less of the sort of hybrid campaigns this year. There was clients that were doing the sort of test and learn where they're going, yeah, cool, let's do 15, 20% of that as a hybrid because I'm not fully confident to put that, full budget into programmatic. And then I think they've kind of, got their operational stuff sorted, and then they've either used it in isolation for specific campaigns around tactical out-of-home campaigns, or continue to use us from a broadcast perspective, which, is that traditional side of the business. I think the biggest categories we've probably seen, over the last couple of years is like tourism. There's been a bit of streaming, there's been a bit of sort of, restaurant deliveries and those kind of things, a bit of government. There's a huge, like, we've worked with 220 advertisers, so there's every category we've probably worked with. Insurance has been another one as well. So yeah, there's not huge trends, I'd say, from a category perspective, but I think, that's pretty consistent across the world as well. Like when VIOOH send through some of their, insights based on categories, it's really so varied because it does appeal to a lot of clients at all different levels of budget.
Okay, great, thank you. And the next question was, are advertisers placing too much emphasis on digital budgets and the last click?
That's for Georgie, for sure.
I don't know too many people looking at clicks anymore, to be honest. So I'm sure there's probably some people placing too much emphasis. Like, I think going back to like case studies, all amazing, but I think historically we used to see in digital, just because you can measure every single metric, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what you should be looking at. So I think KPIs of a campaign are still really important, understanding what the actual objective is, because you're not going to get high results on every single metric that you might actually be able to measure. So I don't know about clicks, but I think being sure about what your actual objective is going to be more important than looking at every single metric possible, because we used to face that issue all the time as offline would come online, and then suddenly they want to be able to look at viewability, conversions, clicks, and like where something was on a page, and it was just kind of like, did you get the return on ad spend that you wanted? Yes, okay, happy days. Like, let's not scrutinize every single aspect of it. So I think actual KPIs and objectives are still going to be really important, and don't get too bogged down in the details just because you can.
Exactly. Yeah, we see it all the time. So Australia's actually quite good in this. At different countries, yes, Asia, last click attribution is still a thing.
Okay.
But outcomes...
I haven't heard of clicks until today for a long time.
Outcomes, to Georgie's point, visits to store, to site, to downloads, all of this, even in programmatic, like bringing offline to online through a purchasing funnel. The outcome is the goal. Definitely not clicks, which I haven't seen either for a while.
That was it. That was all the questions.
Awesome.
Oh, great. We've got one from the floor. Love it. Live.
I'm not anonymous. I'm Chris from Flybuys. Question for you. When do you think we will start to see the tipping point from, programmatic digital out of home, moving from a test and learn to, becoming now the new norm? So similar to the way, I guess, digital was, let's call it 8 years ago. Now it's taken that long, but probably within 5-6 years it was now the norm of the way to buy and trade, from a digital and video currency point of view, and obviously with the proliferation of screens becoming or digital screens, and the cost of actually implementing those lowering. When do you see that? Is going to be 2, 3, 5 years? I know it's a bit of sort of crystal ball, but keen to sort of get your guys' take on that.
I reckon it's still 2 or 3 years away for sure, because what we've kind of seen is that you've got some holding groups who grab hold of it and they're trying to really run right now. You've got others that are sort of middle ground, and then you've got some that are still crawling, right? So once you're all at run stage, then you've hit the tipping point. So there's still a lot of work to go there, and I think there's quite a few issues and why that not everyone's at that point yet. But I mean, we've looked at some interesting numbers from overseas. So the German teams are sort of running 20% of their digital out of home as programmatic already. US is on track to do that next year. UK is probably likely to get to 10%. We're currently at 3%. So like we're not on the same, at the same point of the journey as them. And I think, it's actually becoming harder for us to chase a percentage of digital out of home as well, because the market came back for post-COVID from a traditional sense into digital. There's a massive obsession with digital and not as much as the classic demand. So that number's getting higher, on a monthly basis for us to sort of chase that percentage. But I think we're on track. Like, we're making good progress, but I think we need the holding groups on board. We need that market narrative piece, and then you need the case study. So I think it's probably 2 or 3 years away.
I think it's going to go faster. I think it's going to go faster because what we've been seeing is that in just like three years, markets like German market, Netherlands, Belgium went from 0 to 20-25%, even more. So I think here we are just talking about that's going to go through the same stages, but much faster as the other medium. Think about broadcast, think about print, website, and so on. It took potentially, as you said, 5 to 6 to 8, but broadcast was shorter than the print and the website. And I think that now, obviously, buy side are very well educated and versed and very savvy in buying programmatically. So it's about all the sell side, meaning to get their act together and to respond to the need. But that's going to go much faster, I would say. Fasten your seatbelt.
I guess the second part to that kind of question is probably one for Brad and also John. Do you see a particular format taking off more so than others? So will it be the street furniture stuff, large format? Like, where are you seeing the major investments when it comes down to those as well?
So small format is probably 55% of our revenue at the moment. Whereas large format is probably about sort of 35%. So, if you think about where the traditional market is, the obsession is for digital billboards right now, but that hasn't translated into programmatic buying yet. And I think there's a few reasons. It's traded in quite a different way in that broadcast nature and, briefing out 3 different vendors and looking at price and value and those kind of things versus the programmatic piece. Which is more around sort of right place, right time, higher CPMs and those kind of things. There's also a few operational challenges around the pixel variations. Whoever decided to build a whole bunch of different billboards with all different vendors, from a non-standardization piece was quite annoying. But the thing is that they last 10 or 15 years, so we can't just rip them out and put in new ones. We've got to ride the wave out. So that I think is intimidating for some trading desks, right? To go, yep, you can run this digital out of home campaign or this large format campaign, and you need 35 pixel variations for your 20 grand budget. It's not something not adding up there because they're not going to create that many versions because it costs them $500 to do it every time, and their media budget's gone. So I think that's been a little bit of a challenge. But there's work to do on large format. I still think that it's absolutely got a place, and it's interesting having VIOOH here to hear about, in the US, that's where the money is in programmatic out of home. It's in large format. It's not necessarily, the appetite isn't there for small format. So I just think that the ubiquitous nature of small format, the easy pixel variations, the proximity buys has meant that it's an easier way to jump into it. And now I think we go into maybe potentially the trickier part, which is sort of that large format.
Yeah, totally agree. So for us, as soon as the big media owners came on board, it wasn't really about, I want this type, indoor, outdoor, or whatever. It was literally the audience. We reached that inflection point once O came on later because we had all that reach, and then all the rest of the media owners were already on board. So there was no real appetite for selecting particular types of screens. It was just really about audience reach.
Great. I think that wraps up. Thank you very much for everyone for coming, and feel free to stay and have some more food or coffee, tea, whatever, and enjoy the conversation.